Now, let me introduce our fantastic panelists. So, Elay, CEO of SalesHood, thank you so much for giving us your time today, blessing us with your expertise, and welcome to another Sales Hacker webinar.
And listen, it's great to be here, and good intro, and thanks, Mikey. And as a fellow Canadian, it's great to be collaborating with you. I'm going to spend a couple minutes and give folks just a bit of background. I can see from the chat and the attendee list, I know a lot of you, and it's great to see some of you here that are friends of SalesHood and friends of mine over the years. And for those of you that are new, hello. So my name is Elay Cohen, CEO, co-founder of SalesHood, and written a couple books. Here's one of them, Enablement Mastery. And, if you haven't read it and you're interested in getting it, let us know. We'll make sure you get one, Mikey. I know that here on the feed, I can see John from Boston, who's our VP marketing. I can see Nick Ciesla from Chicago. So they will be able to, kind of get you the book if you're interested in having one. We founded SalesHood for the sole purpose of helping organizations to activate their teams with content. And how do they do it? They learn together, they sell smarter, and they grow faster. We are a purpose-built, all-in-one sales enablement platform. We've been doing this for 8 years, and we are loving leading the way in this explosive sales enablement market. It's just crazy what's going on. And I worked at Salesforce.com prior to founding our company SalesHood, and I led enablement. And so just think about that. Like, I led enablement from 2005 to 2013 at Salesforce.com. So I got to see and do and lead and make it happen at Salesforce, but I never had a platform. And so that was my inspiration and my motivation, my moment of clarity, and that was it. And so it's been an amazing ride. And we have a ton of insights, and we've got a ton of best practices. And, Sales Hacker reached out and said, hey, it'd be great to hear the latest and greatest on what companies and people are doing today around hybrid enablement. And we've got an awesome presentation for you. And what did I miss, Mikey, about myself? I think that's it. I think Toronto, living in San Francisco, CEO SalesHood. And I love the questions are coming in already.
I love it too, because you got the whole spiel from when the whole SaaS world just started to blow up throughout the whole process to now where we're at, and kind of like integrating everything else together. So I'm super excited for this.
When we started doing sales enablement at Salesforce, there was no sales enablement.
Exactly. Yeah.
And Benioff pulled me into his office and said, hey, you know what? Here's what we're going to start doing. We are going to start getting our teams aligned on messaging. And that means they're going to practice their pitches. And that means they're going to do it in their onboarding. And it means that they're going to get the coaching from their managers. And we're going to do it every quarter. And we did it every quarter. And that was kind of a foundation pillar. We're going to talk more about that. And so it's been great to see sales enablement and sales engagement explode over the last 8 years. And so is it good for me to share? Everyone ready for some content and walk you through? Please keep the questions coming in, but I'm going to walk you through some slides and let's get going. I love it. And so we put some thought into what will be interesting for everyone. And so basically, we're going to share some insights. What are we observing? What are we seeing? We're going to share with you some challenges that we've been hearing and how some of our customers are overcoming those challenges. We're going to talk about the power of peer-to-peer and how that is the ultimate in driving engagement and energy and equity when it comes to delivering those revenue outcomes, especially in a hybrid world. And we're going to give you some tips around what's working today. And so if you walk away with like one big thing that you can do, that's a home run for Mikey and I today, right? So that's our goal. We want you to walk away with one thing. And Mikey, were you going to do a quick poll to see who's all here? I'm curious. It seems like we're heavy on the enablement side, but let's do a quick poll and see.
Sounds groovy. All right, everybody, just I'm about to launch her here.
Let's see how it works. There it is. I can see it.
Perfect. All right, let's hear where everyone's coming in from. So we got.
It's really helpful. That way we can adjust the altitude of the conversation and also have a better sense of, kind of your points of view and your biases. These are good biases because how are we doing on the most folks submitted it yet?
We're about 70% in.
Awesome.
But yeah, it looks like we're pretty heavy on the sales enablement Sales
Okay,
leadership.
there we go. Right, we knew that would happen, so they're perfect.
All right, so we're about 80% participating.
Let's do it.
We'll
Let's see what we got.
So
you got it. Boom. So listen, a third of you are in sales leadership, and then another third are in sales enablement. We got some marketers here. Perfect. Good to know. I love it. So thank you. So listen, let's get started. I think it's important to just level set, right? We have so much happening in the world. There is proliferation of tools. Sales enablement is on fire. Sales engagement is on fire. And we've got a ton of macroeconomic issues happening right now. But there's a reality. 20% of our sellers are still creating 80% of our revenue. 30 to 50% of our sellers are actually hitting quota. And then the average tenure of our reps are 18 months. And why is this happening, right? What we're seeing is the inputs of this. Cycle time is too long, ramp time is too long, selling time isn't fast enough, and win rates is still not where it needs to be. So basically, our sales teams, they're not closing enough deals fast enough, and they're jumping around between company to company to company. And this is causing huge strains on many companies. And so this is why we're here. We're here to help overcome these challenges. And so you take this, and this isn't new, right? Whether you're talking to Gartner or Forrester, or you're looking at your sales hacker research reports, or you're talking to CSO Insights, these trends have been consistent over the last 10 to 15 years, but we got to solve them. Then you ask yourself, okay, wait a minute. You take that, and then you go, wait a minute. Now we've got another issue. 48% of our employees are going to continue working at home post-COVID. 55% of buyers prefer interacting with their sellers remotely. Think about that. And then 80% of decision makers prefer remote human interactions or digital self-service. So we've got the challenges of sales performance coupled, layered in with the challenges of hybrid. Mikey, what are you going to say?
That's all I was going to say is I find that we just did another report as well on the whole idea of how 80% of decision makers are going to prefer this whole, no sales rep interaction until they absolutely need it, or even to the pricing and negotiation piece, right? They can find everything themselves. So I think that's going to change how you sell and, how you interact with your prospects drastically too. So just my thought.
Absolutely. And so where we're at now is enablement. Our enablement programs, our enablement systems, our enablement processes are not optimized for hybrid enablement. I said it, we as much as we'd like to think we've got it all sorted, we don't have it sorted. And the reality is our sellers are not the competence, the confidence, and the content. How competent our sellers are, how confident they are, and the content that we're giving them and the tools to share content isn't yet optimized for hybrid enablement. And this is why we're here. But not everyone, right? We've got a ton of companies that are doing some great work, and we're going to share with you those insights. And so I want you to start thinking about the programs you're rolling out. I want you to start thinking about the training, the onboardings, all of the content, the sales plays, your playbooks, and just put this in the back of your minds and just ask yourselves, how ready are our teams for hybrid? And hybrid means two things. It's the competence, so the training. It's the confidence, so it's the coaching, and then it's the content, so it's the selling. And you got to make sure that you're accounting for hybrid enablement across all those dimensions. And so I wanted to just level set with everyone, just to kind of say this is where we're at today. These are some of the challenges, and we really got to up level all of our customer facing employees. And hey, we ran our own webinar a few weeks ago on hybrid enablement. And I love these three amazing practitioners, Jessica, Katie Beth, and Bobby Joe. And they said something fascinating. And this is a webinar that's available, and my team can share the link afterwards. It's an amazing, kind of conversation. They said this. They said the biggest challenge they're facing today is that when they're thinking about rolling out hybrid enablement, that the energy and the equity and the engagement isn't where it needs to be. So what does that mean? How do you drive up energy in a hybrid enablement program? And it's an amazing question, right? And there are ways to do it. I'm going to walk you through some of the tips and some techniques to do it. How do you drive equity? Yeah, man. Go ahead, Mikey.
Sorry, I'm not sure if you want to answer this now, but I just got a question from Tess.
Hey, Tess. Tess, who loves chicken cutlets in New York.
What does the future of sales enablement look like? Hybrid and remote enablement is certainly the focus of now, but what do
Yeah.
you expect the next big thing will be when it comes to enablement?
Right. So I believe we are still in a world where we're trying to figure out how we balance between in-person versus virtual, and I don't think we figured it out yet. I'm going to show you that the techniques and the tips that our sales teams are using to sell, and the tips and the techniques that our enablement teams and ops teams are using to enable aren't yet optimized for hybrid. But I believe hybrid is here to stay. I believe digital selling is here to stay. I believe virtual selling is here to stay. And so what I think is the next big thing in the enablement and the engagement world is the following. I'm going to go back a slide, and I'm going to say the next big thing is companies are going to need one system, one process for boosting the competence of their teams, boosting the confidence of their teams, and making sure the content. So right now there's tool proliferation because everybody was trying to solve the problems. But as we look forward and as we ask ourselves, what is the future of sales enablement? The future of sales enablement is one system that can address all three of these core pillars to ultimately lift the productivity of our team, so we can stop having these not so great performance outcomes. That's the and we're going to show it to you. And any other questions, Mikey?
So I've got one from John, and it's a long one, but I'll try and summarize it. So
yeah.
He's curious to know how others have dealt with new hires in the COVID remote environment. So
I love it.
Worked at multiple different companies throughout the COVID, but now as a senior manager, he's trying to understand how do we fully connect them to the company, to the culture, etc.
Yeah. I love it. So in about 3 slides, I'm going to do a deep dive case study on onboarding. And I'm going to explain specifically and show how an onboarding program needs to evolve and mature to be more hybrid focused. And I'll talk. I love it. So I got it.
Cool.
We'll do that question. And so listen, I want you to think about your programs. I want you to think about the right balance between energy, equity, and engagement. Energy, how are you keeping people excited? How are you keeping people motivated? Equity, how are you making sure everyone has a voice when they're not all sitting together in the same room? When you got some people dialing in, some people in the same room, equity is so critical, inclusion is so critical. And then engagement, how are you engaging people before, during, and after your programs and events and sessions, right? So, just like right now, we're in the zone and folks are adding questions or they're adding comments in the chat. How do you do this, on an ongoing basis? So I want to thank these 3 amazing practitioners. They are amazing. And you should go find that amazing talk that they did. And super, super great to hear them talk about energy, equity, and engagement around hybrid. I'm going to keep going forward, right? And so as we look ahead, oh, my slides it just froze up. There we go. As we look ahead and we say to ourselves, let me just make sure. Yeah, that's my right slide. And as we look ahead and I say, okay, there is a secret sauce. There's a winning formula to helping organizations really embrace hybrid. And the secret sauce is peer-to-peer. Now, I learned about peer-to-peer when I was at Salesforce. And and we brought peer-to-peer to life inside of SalesHood, our purpose-built all-in-one sales enablement platform, right? It's designed to help companies learn together, sell smarter through peer-to-peer. And so by embracing peer-to-peer as a way to speed up sales enablement impact, you ultimately are going to be able to live in a world where some of your sellers are together and some of your sellers and some of your teams are virtual and remote. And peer-to-peer is something that I want to ask you, like, how are you embracing peer-to-peer today? How are you sharing win stories? How are your teams sharing content? How are they coaching each other? How are you doing role playing when folks are spread around the world? How are you doing call shadowing? And how are you doing pitch practice, right? What we've seen is companies that can master peer-to-peer, they ultimately are going to have higher pipeline, higher win rates, higher attainment, and they're going to have, much higher results. And you know what? We all know it. You learn from your peeps. You learn from your people in the hood, right? And so
it also builds out your culture as well, right?
And it builds out your culture, Mikey. Exactly. So as you're thinking about your hybrid program, you should be asking yourselves every time you roll out a new program, whether it's a new pitch, whether it's a new campaign, whether it's a new sales play, ask yourself, how are you scaling with peer-to-peer being at the heart of rolling out your programs? And peer-to-peer is more important now, more than ever, because we're living in a hybrid world. And I'm going to give you some. So you see those examples, they're really just amazing, right? Imagine that you had a collection of asynchronously gathered collection of video win stories from your top sellers, and that became, part of your onboarding and ramping. And like you said, Mikey, like it builds culture, it builds it builds motivation, it builds confidence. We get back to those key pillars. How are we going to make our reps more competent and confident? You got to get them learning from each other, hearing each other. So more on this afterwards. And what I wanted to show you is an example, right? So here are, when we think of the buyer's journey, and when we think about how do we boost confidence, how do we increase learning retention in a hybrid world, I want you just to kind of look across all of these different conversations, right? So imagine that you take your buyer's journey and you take your corporate pitch, and imagine you break it up into small pieces: elevator pitch, customer stories, product presentation, customer presentation, objection handling. You could have a bunch of those, competitive differentiators, business case. And you created a program where you were training your teams. They were coaching each other. They were reviewing each other. And then you were showing them how to share content, videos, and assets with your buyers who are also hybrid and also remote. And imagine that you did this on a consistent basis, and imagine that you had peer-to-peer, like everybody would become conversationally competent, like boom, like that. This is, back to Tessa's question, this is the future of sales enablement, but it's now. And it's how advanced is your program around embracing these principles and architecting your content in a way that gets people learning bite-sized content, coaching each other, and then ultimately sharing content with their buyers. And that's I want to just leave this out there as an example, right? I'm big on key takeaways. If you just walk away with rethinking of your corporate pitch, breaking up into bite size, and then rolling these out as individual programs, that's a home run. And yes, of course, SalesHood can help you with that. But you know what? We're here to talk about insights around hybrid enablement. And I'm going to keep going, Mikey, right? I see some comments.
Yeah, you want to stop and answer a couple? I got one that was kind of goes back to the competence content and competence piece. So Terry asked, I get the competence, LMS and content, CMS. Not sure how I build confidence, especially remotely. What are you including under confidence, and how are you providing support to achieve it?
So as we progress through this presentation, this conversation, the competence clearly is around training and certifications and learn by doing and onboarding and a lot of the core learning management functionality and processes that you'd expect. Confidence is around peer coaching and manager coaching. So as I think about reinforcement and as I think about ways that frontline managers can play an active role in helping to scale the programs and helping to boost the confidence of the teams through one-on-ones, through team huddles, through the coaching that would happen on deals, it's really the coaching piece. So that's the three pillars, right? Confidence is about learning. Competence is about learning. Confidence is about coaching, and it's two types of coaching. It's peer coaching and manager coaching. And then the content piece, the pillar there that I talked about, is all about sharing content and engaging buyers. That's that question, Mikey.
Yeah, awesome.
And we're gonna get deeper. You got more?
I got one more before we'll continue, and then I got a couple more for later. But you got any recommendations on how to integrate marketing intel, example, web trafficking analytics, into your enablement platform?
Right. So that's an interesting question. So the question is, how do you integrate marketing data into the platform?
Exactly.
I would say, how would you integrate marketing insights into the workflow of enablement? And I love that. Right. So for example, look at if I've got a targeted, I'm just brainstorming here, right? Out loud, right? I think sales enablement as a platform, because it is all in one, and because you've got the learning, the coaching, and you've got the insights and the engage, right? It should be fed with insights from different systems, right? So you should get data insights from like a Salesforce system. So that way you can see pipeline progression and you can see that kind of information, so you can correlate activity, right? You should also be feeding insights from the system into marketing systems as well. So where you can get, so I look at the data and I look at the workflow and I ask myself, if I'm a salesperson and I have a new lead, and I just been presented with that contact, and that person has potentially downloaded an ebook, or maybe they've filled out a form, or there's even some of their, there's some really great systems out there that will provide you with that buyer intent data. But that buyer intent data needs to be part of the sales plays. So when you're activating sales plays, and when you're coaching, and when you're training and coaching your teams, and when you're prescribing content to them, the content should be prescribed, and the insights that should be feeding that content should also come from marketing. I think we're going to see the data that is coming from multiple systems is going to become front and center, and the sales enablement platforms are going to be able to prioritize the data for the reps, so that way they can identify what content to share when with their buyers. So super interesting, right? I think there's a lot of interesting overlaps here between enablement and engagement and buyer intent data, and but we'll talk more about that. I love that question.
Cool.
I think it's great because historically, enablement practitioners haven't been thinking about data as much as they should. And all of us included, right? And so we're on a mission at SalesHood. We just rolled out the correlation engine. We're on a mission to try and bring data front and center in the workflow of sales enablement, whether it's learning or coaching or engaging buyers. And I think it's so critical to get access to that data. All right, let's keep going, right?
Yep.
And so I'm going to talk about the three areas, right? We're going to talk about competence, we're going to talk about confidence, and we're going to talk about content. And so first of all, I laid down some foundational elements there where we talked about peer-to-peer as being a core anchor in being able to drive hybrid enablement strategies at scale. But ultimately, you want to build competence with virtual learning experiences, right? I love our pitch AI. I love the ability for sellers to practice and get feedback, and in an automated fashion, know how conversationally competent they are. And this is something that you can do across onboarding and ongoing and everboarding. And it's something that should happen universally, right? When I talk about pitch practice, I mean practicing each one of these conversations, right? And so you want a system that's going to enable you to do it, and you want a space that's going to create space for your sellers to be able, and your teams to be able to see each other, right? Hybrid. It needs to be support asynchronous and synchronous collaboration. And that's an important part of your sales enablement strategies. You want learning to be activity-based, you want video role play, and you want peer-to-peer. I've talked a lot about that. So now I'm going to go deeper. So now let's go a little deeper, and let's ask ourselves what we've learned over the last 24 months is, and this is the question we get asked all the time, Mikey: how do you find the right balance? How do you balance self-paced video versus instructor-led training versus virtual training workshops versus daily, weekly check-ins, assessments, role-playing, right? And peer shadowing, right? So this slide here is intended to present you with, these are all the tools you have to enable your people. And now you have to figure out by program, by tenure, by sales play, what are the levers you're going to use to enable your people? And you want to balance keeping it real, meaning even though folks are remote and hybrid, with doing things asynchronously and synchronously. So these are your levers, and use them wisely. There is no set percentage, except, I know this. If you've got someone sitting on a Zoom or whatever call, and 30 minutes has gone by and you haven't engaged them either with a poll or a question, or you haven't put them into Zoom rooms or some groups or something, you're missing an opportunity to engage, and they're checked out. They're going to start doing something else. I think Bobby Joe, who was one of the speakers from the hybrid enablement webinar we ran, she gave an example, a great story. And turns out one of their employees was sanding their floor while they were doing some training, and it became a joke, right? You don't want your people sanding their floors while they're doing other, and it's a metaphor for, you want people to be in the zone, listening, engaging, and you got to find the right balance. Yeah. I'm going to keep going, Mikey, or you got a question?
Yeah, you can keep going, but I just wanted to make a point there. I love that was a great point where it's, every organization is different, and they're all going to have a different way of, working with their team. So, there is no right way. It really is kind of what works best for your organization, right? And I love that kind of point that you made there.
And it's by role.
Yeah.
And it's by tenure, right? So for example, if you're enabling SDRs, it's going to be pretty hands-on. You'll have daily check-ins probably twice a day, right? You're going to do, on top of the asynchronous learning that they're doing in their new hire onboarding. Compare that to an enterprise AE. Well, you may do maybe in the first week it's daily check-ins, but by the time the second week is, it's weekly check-ins.
Yeah.
And they're going to want mentorship early, so that way they can accelerate their ramp time. So anyway, I think it's really important that you're looking at these different types, and then I want you now to take this and I want to apply kind of this framework. So this is the second thing. If you walked away with this in your head, every program you roll out, everything, every training you roll out, every play you roll out, it needs to have a before, during, and an after. If you just walk away with this and you implement this with your teams, home run. Before, during, and after. So what does this mean? This means that, before every meeting, before every training, before every session, you want to ensure that you're providing folks with a little bit of pre-work, because they can do it asynchronously. And what I want you to do is, in addition to giving them some video content, you want to give them, maybe they do some assessments. Maybe there's a small little quiz, or maybe they record a short little video. But ultimately, what it's doing is giving you pre-session intel on their sentiment and their level of knowledge. So that way you can really understand where they're at, because that way you can make the actual live session that much more impactful, and you can use some of the content that was delivered in the pre-work, right? And when you're doing the live or the virtual session, what you're doing is you're doing group exercises, collaboration, and you're doing polls, and you're making it interactive. But don't do stuff that they can just watch in a video ahead of time. Let that happen ahead of time. And by the way, if you're using a system like SalesHood or other systems, you will know who's completed the pre-work and who hasn't. That's super important. That way, if you show up to a call with 20, 30 of your team members and a bunch of people haven't watched the content, you can make a decision whether you're going to actually run the training or not, or not, or you can just comment on it and you can adjust your content. And then finally, one last point, Mikey, finally, I want folks to think about the after. It doesn't stop at the session. What's the reinforcement training? How are you going to certify and verify knowledge? And then how are you going to enforce? How are you going to enforce? How are you going to enable your managers to do coaching? Back to the question around what does confidence mean, right? So you're building competence and you're building confidence, but you're doing it over a journey. And this can be 30 days. This can be 2 weeks. This can be, whatever the time period is, but want folks to really internalize the before, during, and after. And Mikey, you had a question or a comment.
Yeah. So just to kind of go off of the before, during, and after, how do you marry pre-session work with not requiring new hires to do unpaid work before day one of a new job?
Okay. So I'm not just talking about onboarding, right? This is also ongoing. So absolutely. I think, let's talk about ongoing first. So let's pretend that you've got 100 salespeople and you are rolling out a new product. You could give all those 100 salespeople access to some of the product managers recording kind of the playbooks and some of the details. That's okay, right? So we're all good with ongoing. And when you're hiring people, and if they can't do pre-work, they can't do pre-work. You just got to work it out, right? So therefore, my suggestion is when day one hits, when they're on the payroll, don't just have them show up and they do 3 hours of videos, or don't just show up and do 3 hours of like sessions. Insert the before, during, and after in the day. And so, for example, it's a perfect segue. Did you know the slide was coming up next? Right, here's an onboarding schedule. Right. And so an onboarding schedule has weeks and it has pillars, right? I like people ask me all the time, what are some onboarding pillars that are having, and there's a whole, section on onboarding in my book, and there's an ebook you can download and we can get that available to you. But like, as you think about onboarding and you think about, okay, I got to get my people ramped as fast as possible. Some of them may not fly to the office. So we're talking hybrid. And so what are the pillars of content I need them to master? Company culture, customer stories, messaging and pitch, sales process tools, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I will give folks access to this as quickly as I can, but if folks aren't on payroll, then they get access. So their day one, maybe they spend a couple hours doing some pre-work. And so then maybe I'm meeting them at noon instead of meeting them at 9. So at least then I've had them, they're engaging with the content. Maybe they're even recording a hello. You can see here, we have something fun called Who's Who in the Hood. Like literally in someone's first hour of being a hoodie, they're recording a video introducing themselves, and they're talking about themselves personally, what their passions are and interests, and they're recording a video about their role, how excited they are, and what their goals are for their role. Like that's like in their first 60 minutes. That doesn't require pre-work, but guess what? we're instantly engaging people, and they're instantly becoming part of the team and the culture. So yeah, I think you've got to create a schedule like this of content. You've got to organize the content. You got to sequence the content, and then you got to drip it to them in a timing that makes sense. And as much as you can, get your people watching some of the videos ahead of time. But I get it, right? Some folks, they can't start till they can start, and then you just got to adjust your calendar accordingly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I've got just a quick question before we move on from myself. So like what we were talking about at the on the last slide, where it's like the pre, the during, and then the certification after. How have you been able to kind of, because like for instance, some people, when they get the certification, they kind of like, okay, great, I did it, and now they move on to other stuff, but then kind of almost can sometimes forget about some of that stuff that they learned in that kind of that piece of content enablement and so on.
Yeah.
How do you get them to kind of like go back and just refresh their mindset,
Right.
stuff like that, like just so they're constantly kind of staying there and not kind of forgetting some of the key pieces of the
I love it.
strategy and so on.
All right, so let's take I love the question, and I think the beautiful thing about sales enablement technology today is that the workflow and the user experience is designed to help boost up retention and also help sellers be better just in time. And so just in time training means, for example, if I'm working an opportunity and I'm on stage 2, then I should be served up some training around the pitch. So, for example, if a company rolls out a new messaging certification, which that's usually the first thing many companies do when they engage SalesHood, because it's from a maturity model, getting folks conversationally competent and getting everyone aligned on core messaging is so critical, right? Mm-hmm. Think about outreach and like Manny, right? Manny's got a vision and a message, and everyone at outreach is aligned with the message, right? That doesn't happen by accident. Yeah. And so you roll out a new pitch, a new corporate presentation, and you have everybody watch it ahead of time. And you have everyone engage with the content. Maybe what they'll do is they'll pick their favorite slide, or they'll pick their favorite story. And maybe you do a little quiz ahead of time, right? So folks are practicing the pitch, but they're really, and then you bring them together, whether it's in person or whether it's through virtual groups, and then they can walk through the presentation together. They can talk about it. They can do exercises around how it works, how it doesn't work. And then folks afterwards are given a schedule where they're going to record their pitch. So just think of all the touches there, Mikey, right? Like they've watched it a couple of times, then they come together, they hear it again, they're doing some assessments, they're doing some collaboration, and then they're going to go and record their version. And because things need to be peer-to-peer, they're going to go watch at least 5 to 10 of their peers. And then they're going to get feedback from their peers. And so 60 days have gone by, and boom, like they're feeling pumped up and motivated. 2 weeks later, they're working an opportunity. Like, wow, that pitch, so boom, like how cool is it if the video that they watched here shows up, and reminds them, here's the best practice gold standard. And oh, by the way, here are the 3 top pitches from the top reps. You can watch them as well. Here's your version, and here's the feedback you got from your manager. And you're almost redoing the training just in time before a call. And awesome. So that's what a purpose-built all-in-one sales enablement platform that's designed to specifically be there when the reps need the training, the coaching, and the content when they need it most. And when they need it most is before a conversation. And so, but I want to make sure folks have mastered the content, and then I want to verify that they know it before calls as well. That's how I would think about it, Mikey.
Awesome. No, I love that. And that's funny you say that, because we just did at a company-wide pitchness, right? So everybody had to do their own version, no matter what role you were in or anything like that. And then it was a big competition, but it was really cool to kind of do that. Sorry, I'll let you continue.
I'm going to keep going. So listen, we're talking about competence. We're talking about learning. We talked about messaging and peer-to-peer and pitch practice. And now we're talking about onboarding. So what I want to do is just kind of, again, leave you with tips, right? So these are the onboarding pillars. And sorry, there it is. So when you're thinking about onboarding and you're trying to think about how are you going to evolve your onboarding programs to be optimized for hybrid enablement, you need to think about buyer-centric onboarding by role. And so what does that mean? Think about the pillars think about your content. Don't just like fire hose people in the first week and then check a box and assume they're done. Think about it over an extended period of time, 2 weeks, 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, kind of space it out, give folks the space to consume the content on their own asynchronously, bring them together so that way they can collaborate, talk about it with you, and then start looking at their activities and then do some micro assessments, right? Don't train someone on configure, price, quote, and e-signature in week one. Let them learn, the core message, the core pitch, and let them understand how to tell a story and let them get comfortable with the ideal customer profile, right? So what we're proposing to folks is when you're thinking about hybrid enablement and you're looking to mature your onboarding, break it up by weeks, break it up by buyer conversation, and then start looking at the activities you want to verify that they've mastered, and then assess and then measure performance, right? So for example, with SDRs, we're going to want to measure the effectiveness of them being able to run sequences and being able to write emails, right? Let's check that. Let's verify that before we let them get out into the wild. And I'm just giving that as an example, right? But buyer-centric onboarding by role is so critical. And it's so critical now in a hybrid, because when you're hybrid, the actual notion of a 6 to 8 week onboarding program actually makes a lot more sense. Flatten it out, map it to what they're actually going to do in the weeks when they're ramping, and don't try and just fly them all to HQ and get it all done. So this is an example of something that's going to stay. I love asynchronous learning, and I love peer accelerated collaboration, and I love flattening out content over an extended period of time because it drives up retention and it gives you the training and the content and the coaching just in time, Mikey.
Yep. I think it's a great point.
How are we doing? I'm doing time check. We're good. I think we're okay.
Yeah, we're looking. We got 18 minutes.
18. So listen, folks, don't listen to me. Ring Central. Listen to Siobhan Thatcher. Listen to Sarah Frick. These are amazing leaders. Everybody wants to be like them, and everybody wants to have these kind of numbers. Mm-hmm. They embraced hybrid enablement before the pandemic. So when the pandemic hit, they were ready, and their entire onboarding was hybrid, asynchronous and synchronous. And you can see here the results are just amazing. And what I want to highlight is 70% net promoter score. So they're hitting their numbers. They're doing great with bookings. They're doing great with attainment, and their sellers and their teams love it. That's what the 70, because it's just in time and it's there when they need it most. And they're not forcing people to fly around. And so hybrid is working really beautifully over there at Ring Central. All right. There was a question earlier around confidence. What are some examples of confidence? Coaching, manager and peer coaching, guided coaching for managers, team collaboration. There's a beautiful opportunity every week for enablement teams to insert a little bit of training in that weekly huddle that happens, where the managers are running pipeline and forecast calls. Just take over 15 minutes, pre-organize some content, give them some topics that is reinforcing what you're doing in your learning and in your confidence building, and hand it to them and have them work on it, right? So I think if you're not thinking about the role of the frontline manager and how they can influence reinforcement and coaching to boost up the confidence of your teams, you're missing an opportunity. It's a big black box. So I'm really encouraging everyone to do that. And I love this quote. My slide has just taken a second to come up. Sorry. It's a quote from Forrester that just talks about how important it is for sellers and how much they depend on their frontline managers to be better managers. And so from hybrid enablement, taking your training, taking your content, taking your training programs, and creating meetings in a box or huddles in SalesHood language. So that way you can prescribe coaching huddles to your frontline managers to do individually or to do in team settings. And that should be part of your playbook for enablement. Every time you roll out training, don't forget, that's another one of the things, don't forget, give your managers a little bit of content that they can run on their own with their teams, because they're with them every week. And that's hybrid, isn't it? Last time I checked, most of the sales meetings were remote anyway. So it's a big part here. And I love this story with ActiveTrack. Corey Ayers is an amazing leader, and he runs a hybrid organization. And so I wanted to highlight this one because a lot of people think, you can't really do skills training remotely. You can't really verify pitches, and you can't really build culture and share win stories in a hybrid environment. And you know what? They proved that they can, and they proved by doing it in a hybrid environment and embracing hybrid enablement, they were able to, and this is real, right? They crushed it in their first quarter. And it was, he bought SalesHood and he rolled it out. And that was one of the first things that Corey did. And then they crushed their first quarter because they're able to focus in on these processes, asynchronous and hybrid enablement around pitch practice, skills training, and win stories. They created a whole bunch of coaching huddles for the managers to run on prospecting, on discovery, on qualification, and they did it all asynchronously. And so these are just examples that I'm trying to share with you. And so, Mikey, we talked about 3 parts, right? We talked about competence, confidence, and the one piece we haven't talked about yet is content, right? Yep. And I get this question a lot: is digital selling here to stay? Right. So when everybody goes back, are we going to just get back to meeting folks, in their meetings, back at their offices? And I think the beautiful thing about, what happened in the last 2 years is people got used to running remote meetings. And we have experienced a compression of sales cycles because all of a sudden, you know what, hey, Mikey, if we got to get together on a deal and we got to meet all the decision makers and the influencers, you know what? You can probably get that scheduled with your champion tomorrow. We could just get everyone together tomorrow because no one needs to fly around. Where normally that would take 30 days in the old way. And so we now need to make our meetings matter more. And so I believe virtual selling and digital selling and content sharing and digital sales rooms is here to stay. And so does Gartner. And so as we look across our buyer's journey, we need to enable our teams. We need to enable our sellers. We need to enable our customer success teams to be more thoughtful about how they're going to make the most out of those meetings. And by the way, that before, during, and after, the same is true for running meetings, right? Let's pretend I'm selling to you and we got a meeting tomorrow. I'm going to send you a video ahead of time. I'm going to send you some pre-content. I want to know, if I know you're interested in something, and when we have a meeting, I'm going to engage in the meeting. I'm not going to just have you. I'm going to send you the video and the demo ahead of time, and that way we can talk about it. And then after the meeting, I'm going to send you kind of post-meeting materials, right? So before, during, and after is even more important, even for our sellers. So as enablement practitioners, as sales leaders, we need to do training, and onboarding needs to have the before, during, and after, and we need to train our reps to be better at managing their meetings more effectively as well. And there's a ton of great tech out there. SalesHood, we just launched buyer sites, digital sales rooms. I'm so excited about it. But we did it. Let me tell you why we did it. Because we want to close the loop. We want to close the loop on verifying the effectiveness of our teams on how they're engaging their buyers. And so if a buyer is being trained on a pitch, if a buyer is being trained on a product, and they're being trained on how to use and how to master the content, then we want to also close the loop on the training and get them to be able to share that content and those pitches in one system, so they don't have to bounce around. And then most importantly, I want to grab those insights. Right? There was a question earlier, Mikey, on insights. How do we use data? Right. So if our sellers are more comfortable with digital selling, and if they've been able to master the pitch and master content sharing, guess what? Then when they share content and when they share like a deal room like this with a buyer, we're going to know how interested those buyers are. We're going to know the sentiment. We're going to know the clicks, the views, the downloads, all that great intel, because then I can know how likely my buyer is to buy. Right. And so that's closing the loop. It's not just how proficient my reps are on mastering the pitch. It's not just how effective they are at coaching and coaching each other. It's not just how effective they are completing all those assessments. It's also how effective are they at sharing content and engaging their buyers. And the fact that we're all digital now, we now have an amazing collection of data that we've never had before, that we can correlate and we can know with confidence what's working and what's not working. And that is the future of sales enablement. And that future is now. And if you're not thinking about your programs this way, you're missing an opportunity to really prove impact and elevate your careers and elevate your programs. And Mikey, I got 3 questions here, man.
Yeah, let's do it. I wanted to just touch too on your last point about the digital deal rooms and sales rooms.
Oh, okay, got it. So before I do my key takeaways.
Yeah, I think that's such a cool concept. You could do a whole nother webinar on that. And it's something that we've learned recently over the last few years is that sales can be done no matter what, any size deal through digital, right? Buyers are now becoming comfortable with doing these multi-million-dollar deals over a screen, right? So
absolutely, we saw the stats also earlier that we talked
exactly about. Right. So it's I think that's the future. It's super cool. I would love to dive into that another time, but yeah, okay. So a couple questions here. Susan is asking, can you talk a bit more about your video win stories? Like how long, who shared,
Sure.
when shared, kind of thing?
Absolutely. So let me leave this up here then. So thanks on the buyer sites comment. These are three questions I want everyone to just think about in the back of your minds as you're self-assessing your readiness for hybrid enablement. But listen, win stories, I love it. Right. So here's how it works. I think and I'm just going to tell you with SalesHood, we've got a deal win story recorder where you're taking your sales process and your sales questions and you're creating like a wizard where your teams can answer questions about the deal wins, right? Why do we win? Why did the customer buy? What do they buy? What's the compelling event? Think of your sales process and you can just kind of, or if you use Medic, you can have them answer the Medic questions, whatever it is. But what happens is systematically, our customers are getting their teams to record those win stories. And so over time, you're making it really easy, really accessible. So you got to make it easy. And then over time, you're creating this amazing library of assets. And so these videos, like they're the most watched videos in our platform across all of our customers. And it makes total sense. Salespeople want to watch how to win. And they want to watch the videos and they want to hear from their peers about how they won, why they won, and what assets and artifacts that they use to close those deals. And so the win stories just help streamline a process that would take never happens unless you're flying people to SCO or doing a SCO event. So you can do win stories every day, all night long, and it just becomes a turnkey program. And Mikey, you called it builds culture, right? And so one of our customers, transnational, they were just acquired by Solero, and that's kind of their big. That's where most of their content comes from, right? User generated content, crowdsourced content. It happens asynchronously, and that content forms a foundation of new hire onboarding. And their sellers are in there watching these videos over and over and over. Why? They want the tips, they want the tricks, they want to get motivated, and they want to learn from their peers. So win stories, if you want to learn more about win stories, we can get you in there using the system. Love to have you do it. And it's an untapped potential, untapped knowledge in organizations. And we just figured out a way to do it, very easily and at scale.
Mm-hmm.
I love it. Go win stories. Thanks for highlighting that one, Susan.
Yeah, fantastic. Awesome. I got a couple. Susan said, wow, what a great tool. So she's excited. Okay.
Thank you, Susan.
So I got one from Terry here. In your view, who is primarily responsible for development of content? And how do you measure the value of the content you provide to your sales team?
I love it. So how do you measure? Okay, so I put this slide up so folks can see SalesHood if they want. Let me do one thing. I think content creation and creating content from a variety of different publishers and stakeholders and subject matter experts is not something that a single person owns in a company. Right. This is the ultimate in go-to-market alignment is when you've got clarity of roles and responsibilities across sales and marketing and ops and product management, where different folks are responsible for creating different content, whether it's product playbooks or competitive battle cards. And so I believe what enablement owns the process to get content created and to get content curated and to get content distributed out to the teams and to enable the consumption of the content and to get that content measured and trained, right? I think the process of content activation, I believe, is owned by enablement. And that's because we've got our tentacles everywhere inside of organizations, but the owners of the content are the subject matter experts. And the job of the enablement practitioner, the enablement leader, is to get alignment between the CRO and the CMO on the division of responsibilities of who's going to create what content and what's the bill of materials that need to be created on a regular basis and what's the frequency that the content needs to be updated and all that, right? But, my experience is following. Marketing, they want to create content. They just need someone to tell them what content to create, what frequency it needs to be created in, and just give us a template because they don't want to create the wrong content. And they just want to know, is the content that we're creating, is it making an impact? And the job of the enablement practitioners is to organize the content in a way that gets sellers to be more competent, more confident, and to get them sharing content more effectively with their buyers. Terry, I hope that answered your question. We could do a whole session just on go-to-market alignment around content activation as well.
Totally.
And by the way, if anyone is interested, We do have a course, right? So listen, I would love each and every one of you to become SalesHood customers. And you all will one day, I promise. But in the meantime, if you're not ready to talk about sales enablement software, no problem. Join our course. And we've got a free sales enablement leadership course where we talk at depth, in depth about being strategic, measuring the metrics that matter, content activation, sales plays, messaging alignment, building the business case. And ultimately, it's got an undertone to it, which is how to be a better leader, how to be strategic, and ultimately how you can execute your programs in a hybrid world. So listen, I encourage you to check that. It's free and it's a contribution that we do to the market, and we love it. And we're all about helping to elevate the profession. And that was what today was about as well, Mike. He wanted to just give folks some insights and give folks some ideas and share some best practices and give you some resources in the end. So if anyone's interested, I'm sure someone on my team is putting a link in there now so you can sign up for it free. And if anyone wants to see SalesHood or see the win stories, we'd love to get you there. But Mikey, let's get some more questions in.
Yeah. Okay. So I got one more here that I got before I let you go. So where did we find? Okay. So what kind of shifts do you see right now, especially happening with sales and this, the big role of customer success moving into the future?
Absolutely.
What are your thoughts there?
So first of all, you notice a few of the slides I shared. I'm not talking sales process. I'm talking buyer's journey. It's an end-to-end process, right? So the big shift I'm seeing is enablement is responsible for more than just sales. And I'm not sitting here saying we're going to change the category name, but what I'm saying is enablement practitioners are responsible for BDRs, SDRs, AEs of all segments, CSMs, account managers, services, support. So every revenue, every customer-facing employee they all need access, right? So if you think about the personalized learning experience, and you think about learning by personalized learning experiences by role, a lot of the content is similar. However, the verification of knowledge, the assessments of knowledge, and the engagement that these customer-facing folks have with buyers is slightly nuanced. And so you've got a foundation of content, and that's why you need one system that's going to handle the competence and the confidence and the content sharing. So that to me is a big shift as we're looking to do more company-wide enablement, and as we're looking to do more enablement across the entire revenue org. Companies are going to look to have less systems and have more of their people on one system, so that way they can share content more effectively and actually prove the impact more efficiently as well. Because that's the holy grail here, right? Like, we can keep creating content, we can keep running trainings, we can keep running programs, but if you're not measuring what's working, what's not working, you got to ask yourself, what impact are you having? And so that's the big shift, right? We're shifting to all revenue, and we need to be able to prove impact by role across the revenue organization. And that takes careful planning, and it takes alignment with leaders, and it takes, you got pen and paper. You got to write it down. What are the roles? What are the buyer conversations? Go back to that slide. What are the assessments? What are the activities? And then you got to build the hooks into the system so you can measure it. If you're not thinking that way for your programs, your people are gonna start knocking on your door and saying, "What are you doing? How much you spending? What's going on?" And I'm trying to save you from that. I want to help you get ahead of it. I want you to be able to prove impact before your leaders come asking you what impact you're having.
Amazing, Elay. This has been so awesome. I've had such a blast. I've learned so much from you. Because this is it's such a huge topic, especially as we're going into this new realm of selling, right? So if orgs aren't kind of keeping up to date and making sure their process is in place, then it's going to be tough to stay ahead of the curve, right? So
Totally.
I love this. Everybody, thank you all so much for joining us today, and Elay, thank you even more for giving us an hour out of your day. I know you're super busy, so I had a blast. I can't wait to do it again soon, hopefully. Maybe we'll talk about content creation and then maybe deal rooms next time. But
absolutely. Hey, I'll leave people, if you've gotten this far into listening to this and you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, Elay at SalesHood.com, ELAY at SalesHood.com. Feel free to do so. I'd love to hear from you and hear your thoughts. Mikey, man, you're awesome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Elay. I'll let you go. And I'm looking forward to doing it again soon.